Exodus chapter 2. And there went a man of the house of Levi, and took to wife a daughter of Levi. And the woman conceived and bare a son, and when she saw him that he was a goodly child, she hid him for 3 months. And when she could no longer hide him, she took for him an ark of bulrushes, and daubed it with slime and with pitch, and put the child therein, and she laid it in the flags by the river's brink. And his sister stood afar off, to wit what would be done to him. And the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river, and her maidens walked along by the river's side. And when she saw the ark among the flags, she sent her maid to fetch it. And when she had opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the babe wept. And she had compassion on him, and said, This is one of the Hebrews' children. Then said his sister to Pharaoh's daughter, Shall I go and call to thee a nurse of the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for thee? And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, Go. And the maid went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, Take this child away, and nurse it for me, and I will give thee wages. And the women took the child and nursed it. And the child grew, and she brought him unto Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she called his name Moses, and she said, Because I drew him out of the water. And it came to pass in those days, when Moses was grown, that he went out unto his brethren, and looked on their burdens. And he spied an Egyptian smiting an Hebrew, one of his brethren. And he looked this way and that way, and when he saw that there was no man, he slew the Egyptian, and hid him in the sand. And when he went out the second day, behold, 2 men of the Hebrews strove together. And he said to him that did the wrong, Wherefore smitest thou thy fellow? And he said, Who made thee a prince and a judge over us? Intendest thou to kill me as thou killedst the Egyptian? And Moses feared, and said, Surely this thing is known. Now when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to slay Moses. But Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh, and dwelt in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water, and filled the troughs to water their father's flock. And the shepherds came and drove them away. But Moses stood up and helped them, and watered their flock. And when they came to Reuel their father, he said, How is it that ye are come so soon today? And they said, An Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds, and also drew water enough for us, and watered our flock. And he said unto his daughters, And where is he? Why is it that ye have left the man? Call him, that he may eat bread. And Moses was content to dwell with the man. And he gave Moses Zipporah, his daughter. And she bare him a son, and he called his name Gershom. For he said, I have been a stranger in a strange land. And it came to pass in process of time that the king of Egypt died, and the children of Israel sighed by reason of the bondage. And they cried, and their cry came up unto God by reason of the bondage. And God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham and Isaac and with Jacob. And God looked upon the children of Israel, and God had respect unto them. We see in this the beginnings of some very interesting things that are going to happen to Moses. Basically, he's brought up as a prince in Egypt. His real mother, gets to nurse him. And he gets brought up as a prince in the house of Pharaoh. For them, the whole family was part of the royal court. And so the daughter of a pharaoh, her sons would also be considered to be appropriate heirs, potentially, for being pharaoh. Some interesting things here. We know more about Moses than is written here. In Acts, if I remember correctly, it talks about him being mighty in all the learning of the Egyptians. In Josephus, if I remember correctly, it talks about him being mighty in word and deed. In Hebrews, there's some other description about him in the New Testament. This story about him killing the Egyptian is a problem to many people, but the word to slay and to strike both can be honestly translated from the same word in Hebrew. It basically means to beat down, and it indicates this sort of battle that a soldier would have with another soldier. But the question is, why was Moses doing that? The reason he looked to the right and to the left, looked around to see, was because he knew that the Egyptians would not tolerate him defending a slave. Slaves were considered garbage, trash, disposable, Hebrew slaves especially. And there is an indication that, in some writings, that in fact what Moses did was one of two things. Either there was some effort to assassinate him, and he defended himself, and in the process of defending himself, killed the attacker, or one that is also a story that's also repeated in the Quran, for instance, is that the Hebrew taskmaster was attempting to rape a Hebrew woman, and he was trying to defend her, and this fellow wouldn't back off and started to strike at Moses, and Moses struck back and killed the man. In any event, we find out that Moses found out that it was known, though he didn't realize it was known. When Pharaoh found out, nobody killed a slave without Pharaoh's permission normally. There was always a penalty if you did that without Pharaoh's permission, because slaves were his. And it was viewed not much different than stealing from the king. And Moses left. Now, there's a great deal of difference between here and the Charlton Heston movie. It says he went to Midian. Midian is one country over from Egypt, right beside the Nile Delta, right beside Egypt, where the Nile goes into the Mediterranean, is a great big peninsula called the Sinai Peninsula. That is not where Midian is. Midian is one country over from there. And because there were mines, there were copper mines and other mines that the Pharaoh had in the Sinai, in the mountains of Sinai, where they mined copper, and I think there were some turquoise or some other kind of gem type stuff. And that would not have been a safe place for Moses to go, because there were armies there that were guarding the slaves who were doing that. So he went to Midian. So he was a long ways away. And in the process of time, that would have been about, we know otherwise, it was about 40 years. He stayed with Jethro, who was the sheik of Midian, and that Jethro gave him his oldest daughter, Zipporah, to become his wife, and she bore him a child named Gershom. So this is the beginnings of the story of Moses, and doesn't tell us much about what he did. That would have been one incredible journey, to go from the capital of Egypt to Midian. I've seen that country, literally baked hell.